How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the channel where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. My name is Maz Gutierrez. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about Monkey Man. Now, the film tells the story of Kid who unleashes a campaign of vengeance against the corrupt leaders who murdered his mother and continue to systematically victimize the poor and powerless. Now, Dev Patel to me is somebody that if he's attached to a project, you can almost take it to the bank that it's going to be either good or just absolutely great, because even though he has two movies in his filmography that I'm not the biggest fan of, those two being The Last Airbender and Crappy. Even though he has those two crappy movies, to me personally, in his filmography, he is the best part of those movies and he shines just like a bright star. So when I saw the trailer for Monkey Man and you have him not only just starring in this movie, but he's also the director and the writer for this movie, I was just automatically hooked because I love him in front of the cameras and I wanted to see what he was able to do behind the cameras, and just seeing everybody just give him a standing ovation at South by Southwest, that made my heart smile because I just absolutely adore him, from Slumdog Millionaire to probably my favorite movie that he's done so far, even with Monkey Man, Lion. That movie is just absolutely emotionally gripping, and while he's just in it for like the last half of that movie, he just elevates that last half a lot more. And while Dev Patel definitely shines in front of the camera, he most definitely also shines behind the camera, because at the halfway point of this movie, I was almost getting worried that I was going to be in the minority that was not going to enjoy this movie at all and thought that it was just going to be a fine little movie. I didn't think it was going to be the best movie of the year because it does take a little while for this movie to get going. You have him as a jobber at these underground fighting rings, and he's just getting the snot kicked out of him. And that is exactly what he's there to do. He's there to hype everybody up and make everybody look good while he takes all the beatings. And then we move into where he gets a job working for this hotel, kind of undercover, trying to get some information as to what's going on and trying to bring down the head people who is responsible for the murder of his mother. And while you have some kick-ass action sequences in there, it was moving a little bit slowly for me, to the point where we were moving into the second act and I was conflicted whether or not I was going to fall in the line of somebody that just liked it for what it was, or I was going to come out loving it as much as a lot of people. And the thing that I love about this movie is the fact that Dev Patel definitely puts his own style when it comes down to the action sequences. There are moments in here where the camera is just moving, and he uses a couple of techniques that I really enjoyed. He uses the first shooter point of view, and there's also some well done handheld action sequences. But in that first half of the movie, when we get to the action sequences, there's a lot of shaky cam, which I'm not the biggest fan of, and I was getting worried that we were going to be getting a lot more of that. But then once we move into the second and third act of the movie, that is where the movie started to pick up for me a little bit more, because there were a lot of emotional moments in here, especially when you have this character that Dev Patel plays. He is not somebody that is a badass from beginning to end. This is a guy that has so much trauma because of what happened when he was a young kid. There are a lot of layers to this character that I absolutely love that didn't make him feel invincible. He takes the punches and he takes them really, really hard. He doesn't feel like somebody that needed to be this overpowering presence on screen. He knew when to take the hits, and when he takes the hits, he takes the hits. And that's something that I really loved and appreciated about not only just Dev Patel's writing, but also his direction when it came down to handling this character, because there could have been that temptation to just make this character a badass. But that's not what happens. He's vulnerable whenever he needed to be vulnerable, and he definitely has a lot of trauma hiding inside, and he uses that in order to have a fantastic third act. Because once we get the action thrown down, that is when the movie starts to pick up for me, and that is where the movie started to grab me a little bit more. Not only do we have context for what he's doing and how he's going about this, but he also layered it with mythology in here that it took me a little while for me to get used to it. But once we get the explanation, once we get to know a little bit more of where he is and where he comes from, then that is when the movie started to get a little bit more emotionally gripping for me, and I was starting to enjoy the movie a little bit more, because once we get into that third act, it's basically a free for all. And I know a lot of people are making this feel like a John Wick and Mumbai kind of movie, which it kind of is to a certain degree. But just the way that he handles the action sequences in the third act, don't go into this movie expecting a full blown action movie from beginning to the end, because it is a little bit slow, especially in that middle act where something happens to him and he has to go into hiding, and we start getting some explanation on who this character is, what his background is, why he is the person that he is today. And I thought that is where the movie absolutely worked for me. The action sequences are well handled in that third act, and he doesn't use the shaky cam all too much. It's just in the first act where it gets a little bit too much, and I was getting a little bit worried that we would be getting that throughout the entire movie. But it's just an absolute wild ride. I absolutely enjoyed this movie a lot more than I was fearing I was going to enjoy it, because it does take a little while for the movie to get going and to get endeared with these characters. Plus, you also have this little side character who's just there for comedic relief. But whenever Dev Patel injected humor in this movie, it worked, and it didn't risk the emotional state that we were in, because there are a lot of emotional moments in here that I really absolutely loved. And you get a little bit choked up too, because just the way that it was displayed on screen, I absolutely loved it. His direction in here, the cinematography for this movie absolutely worked. It made Mumbai feel like a character unto itself, which is something that I really enjoyed. And overall, I'm going to go ahead and give Monkey Man an 8.5 out of 10. It's just an absolute right. If you have been looking forward to this movie and you've heard all the hype around this movie, believe it. But those are my thoughts on Monkey Man. Are you guys planning on checking this film out? Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments below and let me know, what is your favorite Dev Patel movie?